Hey, all you mutant goons, get your asses back in seat. The bell just went off. We're gonna need all those F's from you. F's for fuck. Enjoy the new episode.
This is Slashers, your new favorite podcast about your new favorite horror media. My name is Jake, and with me, as almost always, is my esteemed colleague, co-host, and cohort, Doug. Doug, say hello to the mutant goons from beyond.
Hey, all you mutant goons from beyond, you ready to get your sickness and pandemic on in this film?
Dude, this movie aged incredibly well, both after 2016 and after 2020. Am I right?
Oh yeah, no, I was watching. I'm like, man, they really hit the nail on the head when he's like, oh, it's a pandemic, it's a pandemic, and plus, all the infected kids look like Barbara Ferrer after a bit. So
Ha! Yeah, and they talk about quarantining and stuff. I was really surprised that when they were running away, they weren't like social distance, social distance.
Cooties 2, wait for it.
Dude, I could see it. If it wasn't for the fact that this movie made like $5 and no one saw it except for you and me, apparently.
Yeah, well, you want to know what? This is one I always thought was a direct-to-video movie. I didn't. It was. I don't think it was in theaters. Really was.
Very, very limited. It only made like $581,000 at the box office, which basically it's just, indie theaters and art house stuff like your Lemleys or whatnot.
Yeah, because I saw the distributor on it, Spectrevision. Like a lot of their stuff, like Greasy Strangler, it's very limited. Same thing, like Hobo with the Shotgun was also another movie that was put out by this company. So you know what I mean? Like the first time I seen those were on DVD. So
Yeah, and Spectrevision, I think they're going to be, they're a fun genre filmmaker, but I think that they really have to kind of step up the like online comes to a lot of their movies. For instance, there's talks of they did Daniel Isn't Real and then Arch Enemy, which were both from Adam Egypt Mortimer, which apparently are supposed to be part of the Vortimex trilogy, which I was reading about. And I'm like, you're not going to get a trilogy if nobody saw the shit. And when you got Joe Manganiello and stuff like that, I feel like he has a really good nerd following. It was really frustrating to me to see, like, you could get it online, but there wasn't a lot of hype. There wasn't a lot of media. And it was kind of cute to see, like, I was able to watch a bunch of press junket kind of interviews on this movie because they actually did some.
Well, see, here's the thing. I feel like a movie like this, like I was kind of turned off seeing it before I even watched it. Like last night I watched it. I'm like, oh, this is a lot of fun. Like I remember seeing a little bit of it here and there. And like, for example, the poster, look at your green screen on the back. Like it could turn people off. They're like, oh, this looks like a stupid movie. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But no, I mean it has some jokes in there, but there's one part we'll get into it later. But I'm like, oh man, this is pretty serious. Is this more of a horror movie about zombie kids, or is it more of a horror movie about being a teacher?
Yeah, honestly, like, so I watched it with my wife and I even posted on Reddit. And this is why I don't post on Reddit. So I posted on the subreddit Zombies. And I was like, hey, any educators or people who work in school districts here? I just recently rewatched Cooties and I watched it with my wife, who's an educator, and she basically rolled her eyes through it. Does anybody have any thoughts on what they thought of the movie or missed opportunities? And I got downvoted and no one commented. So fuck Reddit. But my point is, having done some substitute teaching, having a credential in teaching, I can tell you that there's a lot of stuff that they did very well. And there's quite enough, meat on the bone. Like you said, if they did Cooties 2 Electric Boogaloo, you could have a hell of a lot of fun, especially in the post-COVID world.
Oh, exactly. Well, hey, you're getting a lot farther than I did on Reddit. Every time I post on Reddit, all I see is wow, such empty. That's all I see.
Well, and what's amazing is the only times that I get like really good upvotes and stuff is when I'm just a snarky shithead. Like there's a subreddit, so there's Squared Circle, which is a pro wrestling subreddit, and then there's SC Jerk, which is Squared Circle Jerk, and it basically makes fun of the people in the other one. And so whenever I post on there, I feel like the coolest kid in the room. I'm like, yeah, I am funny sometimes. But if I post in like the Squared Circle, people are like, fuck you, die. Your opinions are irrelevant and your dick is small.
Oh yeah, no, that's the fun thing. See, you should post in one group and then post in the other group saying like, "Oh, look at this asshole! Just post here, make fun of him." It's like it's me. You know what I mean?
Dude, that's a brilliant idea. Just pin them against each other, and I won't even use different accounts. I'll use the exact same username and see if anybody catches on.
Yeah, you'll get those. They say, "Hey, he's trolling." It's like, no, how can you troll yourself? It doesn't exist.
Honestly, it would be so great to give some people some humble pie who are being smarmy and looking down at others. And it's like, you didn't even catch this, dingus. But speaking of dinguses, we're talking about Cooties this week. The whole theme of this month is hack to school, but we're doing school themed horror, and we figured this one would be our home ec class for the month because it's fucking grotesque. And we could have done anatomy, and there are a few other ones, PE for instance, but whatever, pick whatever one you want it to be. In fact, here's the thing: if you have a better idea than home ec for Cooties, you send us an email at slasherspod@gmail.com, and if it's more clever, I'll let you know, and if it's not, I will ignore you, like plenty of emails that we get.
Well, I mean, I could see this one as home ec or crossing guard duty because he's just taking mushrooms in his car the whole time. I thought that was the funniest part.
That's some really good. So one thing I will give credit to. So the directors of this film are the same directors who did Becky, and this was their first film. I think that this movie is better than Becky in a lot of ways. I think it also struggles with the same pacing issues where that middle second half, or I guess the last part of the second act is really slow, but then it picks up at the end and has a good punch. When it comes to a very effective way of utilizing people and sets and actors, like you could tell that they had the dude from Lost for 15 fucking minutes. So they shot everything that they could in the van and then they were done. You know, they had the kids, and you know, when you're doing these like montages, that way you don't have kids and actors unions and specific labor laws. You just get the glimpse of the kid. So I thought that was very, very, sophisticated for amateur filmmakers at this point.
Oh, exactly. And yeah, I mean, they got a full cast of comedians here too. Some of them were just like the guy's name is Doug, but it's the trying to remember
Leigh Whannell.
Leigh Whannell, yeah,
dude, he is amazing.
Yeah, he plays a good weirdo.
He and then Ian Brennan, who worked for Glee, he did the vice principal. The two best characters in the movie are those two characters, and it's so funny because they remind me not of like the way that they are, but how fleshed out those characters are. Reminds me of like Bill and Ted, which started off, the writers of Bill and Ted did improv, and those were characters they created. So like the imprint of them as a person and a writer on the character, I love those characters, and I'm so glad they kept them for themselves.
Mm-hmm. No, exactly. Well, any other well, there's one joke in here too I thought was pretty fun. There's a Hobbit joke in here.
So Elijah Wood fought to get that out, but then he, as a producer of the film, realized that you kind of had to keep it. But apparently that's completely improv by Rainn Wilson.
Oh, really? So he didn't want that in there. I didn't know that.
I mean, imagine the whole guy's career basically just became The Hobbit and Lord of the Rings. And it's hard because before that, he was the kid from Flipper, where, like people have that branding associated. And so I love Elijah Wood. I think that he's great. I think he's very charismatic and interesting. He's a genrephile, which I appreciate. And tell me if this is your impression. He's like the older kid who just borders on being hokey, but still pulls it off.
Yeah, I mean, for this movie here, I mean, there's all these other characters and actors that kind of overshadow him a little bit because he's playing the straight man here. You know what I mean? Like Elijah. Well, I recently just watched the Maniac remake, and yeah, Elijah Wood's really good in that. For the
he's
stuff
great.
You see him in, yeah.
So,
but yeah, no, this one here, he is kind of like, but the genre file is great because he produced one of my favorite movies, Greasy Strangler, so he knows his stuff.
Yeah, and honestly, like other things that he did, like, I don't want to live in this world anymore, and Daddy's Home and stuff like that. It's so nice because it doesn't feel like, for instance, when Jim Carrey started doing serious films like The Number 23 or The Majestic, it doesn't feel like I'm trying to break out of a character entity. It's more like, this is who I am. This is what I like to do. This is the art I create. And whether he's behind the camera doing producing or in front of it, I think he brings a lot to the table. And he is really, really good at being a straight man and being like a normal dude. So much so, as I'm watching this, I'm like, you have to think that kid Ben Feldman from Cloud9 Superstore, whatever the show is called, had to basically copy and paste this character of Clint, right?
Mm-hmm. So
I'm too smart. I've escaped this world, and I'm just kind of settling back.
Yeah, exactly. And the whole life thing is that you can kind of relate to him. Like he's like, oh yeah, I'm from New York. I'm a writer. And then he's really just teaching. But here's the thing though, I mean, I understand because the pay grade's low, but besides everyone in this movie being a dick, like they really just rip on teachers so hard. I mean, I know it's kind of like, it's not the most gracious thing, but like I mean, I'm not a teacher, so I wouldn't know, but is being a teacher really this like spiteful?
So this is a really interesting part, and they brought it up, and I put some notes about it.
Mm-hmm.
There's a great scene where Rainn Wilson talks about the perception of teachers. You know, you hear the expression "those who can't do teach," and he directly addresses that. And he's like, and also you want me to like watch your kids. And I think that really resonates again post COVID. And I'm sorry that I'm contextualizing this. Maybe somebody will read this or listen to this episode in 50 years and go, why does he keep talking about that? Well, we're still living through it. But the idea of, when people had their kids go to homeschooled education, people lost their fucking minds and were willing to let their kids die of a fucking infectious disease because they just didn't want them in the house. And when you realize like how much work goes into being a teacher, it is crazy. And so many people are like now realizing it because it's not just educating your kids, it's also childcare so you can make a living. So I feel like they do a lot better job than I expected and that I remembered of addressing that, where they're sympathetic to an extent. Like they're all eccentric characters, but they're all to a certain extent understandably so. Like Republican lady, she keeps bringing these things up because she feels victimized. She brings up weapons because she's at risk. And so like it's not just you're a vicious asshole. Does that make sense?
Oh, it does. Yeah. Well, that's a lot of input to take in. My brain's frying.
Well, it's interesting to me because going to Jack McBrayer, there were a couple lines in it, like when it starts off with like the gay partner tennis joke, I was like, that felt a little dated, not terribly so. Then when it gets to Leigh Whannell, like the fact that it's like he's just kind of a guy with a broken brain, those ones are kind of the weaker justifications, but I feel like everybody else has a really good motivation for being who they're at or where they're at. Really interesting to watch this after watching Slither last month, because there's like even the school setting where they park was very reminiscent of where Elizabeth Banks parks her car and then Michael Rooker's like la, 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 if you remember that movie.
Oh yeah, no, I remember that movie. And well, I got to give kudos to this movie too, because there's also a scene with a Karen soccer mom that she's on her phone not paying attention, and she gets killed by her baby. So kudos to you, Cooties.
Honestly, and I think that was a very, very deliberate choice in that. Did you catch how fucking shitty the sound mix is on those sound effects in the background? I think that was purposeful. I think they did that because they knew that that's risking losing the audience. And so doing terrible sound effects is like, okay, it's not too real. It's not too gross to kill a baby. And then you get the punchline of the baby killing her. So I think that was very cleverly edited together. Do you think that was deliberate?
I do think so, yeah, because it kind of sounds like, she's like, yeah, what are you doing with your brother back there? And it's cartoony. It sounds more Looney Tunes than anything. And then you see the baby kind of stand up. And at first I'm like, oh, are they actually going to show the baby? Are they going to go Human Centipede 2 and show the baby getting crushed? But nope, it's a zombie baby. Same thing. Like it's on par with that baby, the baby from Dead Alive. So.
Very much so. And especially you see like a side profile with a little bit of red. So it's not, I mean, I doesn't think that it like you ever risk jumping the shark with that. Let me ask you this. Did you see the Lupita Nyong'o Little Monsters that came out a couple years ago?
I did not know. That's that's the one that everyone confused for. Is that the one with the want him, need him, got him? No, not that one.
Not with hand sanitizing Harvey Mandel. No.
Mm-hmm.
I loved that movie. And so I was kind of worried, I'll admit, going back to rewatch this, because I liked this movie. It wasn't like anything mind-blowing. It was just fun. It was a good, popcorn movie. And I was worried because I really liked that one so much that it would make this one look worse by comparison. Now, I can definitely see how that movie improved on some of this stuff, especially when it comes to pacing and everything and sympathizing with the kids and making that, just more symbiosis with the teacher and the student. But honestly, I think that this stands alone. And so I was gracious to myself. I didn't sit there and just compare the two.
Yeah. And and this one's goofy enough to where like I said, the poster in the background just kind of threw me off when I first seen it. I'm like, one of those movies.
Yeah.
But no, it's a lot of fun. And it does take it. It's not as like my perfect recommendation for like a horror comedy that just fits perfectly is like Return of the Living Dead, where it's still scary, but you're kind of you're laughing at the situation with that those characters are in, but those characters are taking the situation seriously. See, before I saw this, I thought the characters were going to be like winking at the camera, joking, and it's like, oh, we're in on the joke, because Return of the Living Dead's not like this. But
No,
lucky enough, I mean, there was jokes here and there, like, oh, she's getting eaten in the broom closet with the kid. What do we do? Just leave her in there.
Yeah.
So some of that stuff was like, oh yeah, it's poking fun. It's a little too on the nose, but yeah, I mean, for the most part, it's an enjoyable movie, and it's on Tubi and Roku for free. So yeah, watch it while you can.
And one of the things I think is very interesting about the script writing is so Leigh Whannell did Saw, Insidious, very, successful monetarily. He also wrote and directed Upgrade and The Invisible Man. And one of the things I think is great about pairing him with the guy from Glee is, you get kind of the best of both worlds. And now let me say this. I don't think Insidious is the best fucking movie. I think it's an incredibly successful horror movie. And I think that's a great thing that you get with the tone of this film is it's very good, again, at being a lowest common denominator without alienating anybody. It doesn't go too gory for the freaks or, for the sensible people. It doesn't go too safe for the freaks. It's a very good, kind of checklist for all of them. I think that the issue with the film is the filmmaking. I think the script is very serviceable. Yeah.
The script is very serviceable, and like you said, with the Rainn Wilson doing his improv. In fact, the one I had the most problem, I was annoyed with Rainn Wilson the most. I don't know if it's because he kind of, I don't know, like I never watched The Office. I've seen maybe bits and pieces. I'm not a big Office guy.
Okay.
But I recently seen some behind the scenes footage of what was it, Juno, where it's a deleted scene where he was playing the gas station clerk.
Okay.
He's a dick.
Yeah.
He's a dick. He's like, oh, why are you getting this girl? Let me do it. I'm in the office. Da, 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 da. I'm just better than you. I'm like, what an asshole. So he kind of played this character like he was in real life, behind the scenes on Juno.
Interesting.
Yeah. So check it out. It'll make you kind of, if you like Rainn Wilson, that might deter him from like, oh, that guy's an asshole.
Yeah, I mean, I've followed him. I think he does something with Zach Anner called Soul Pancake, I think is what it is, where it like basically, these kind of videos about religion or whatever. I don't know. I always get worried when I see those behind the scene things, especially after I saw, I think it was Randy Quaid, Dennis Quaid, where they basically made a mock thing of the Christian Bale Terminator Salvation, where he's like, get the fuck, I'm going to kick your fucking ass. And so he's like acting, and he's like, this fucking dickhead, blah, blah, blah. And then it shows a different angle where you realize it's all a bit, and there's literally a guy in a dick costume. Have you seen that?
I haven't seen that. No, I'm curious. I'll have to YouTube that.
And it's interesting because it's like, there's so many factors that go into these things. My default setting is there's just no excuse for being inhospitable. If somebody's giving you their time and they're working hard. Yeah. When you see these ones where it's like Christian Bale's like literally yelling at a guy for fucking around on a set, if you're standing in water for 12 hours and you're uncomfortable and you're tired, and he's probably starving himself to be able to keep a sexy, trim aesthetic. Like, there are things, but I still have a hard time with that. So you just saying that, I'm like, rain. Ew.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's not, like I said, they show it's maybe a 5-minute clip, and he's just saying like, I'm the actor. I'm the only real actor. Da, 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 I'm on The Office.
Oh,
da, 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 da. And then he throws who's the person that played Juno? I'm drawing blanks on there.
Well, it's Elliot Page. It was Elliot time, I think.
Yeah, Elliot Page, and and he's like, oh, get a real actor next time. She's no good. And then he gets like a candy, or she gets a candy bar and throws it at him because she's pissed. And
really?
He's like, oh, really? You want to go there? I'll fucking, he's like just going crazy. I'm like, man, he's acting exactly like he does in Cooties.
That's insane.
Yeah. So you listeners out there that are listening, if you like The Office, type in that Juno behind the scenes with Rainn Wilson. Maybe it'll change your mind. Cause I'm like, man, that's an asshole.
Oh, well, let's move on. He's made my butthole pucker. Aside from being in House of a Thousand Corpses, he doesn't have a whole lot in terms of horror for his credentials, right?
No, he's just kind of living off the Bob Ross, kind of like Bob Ross fame, where it's like, oh, my face is on lunch boxes and stuff, so I'm making money that way.
I just realized he's done a lot of DC voice acting, which is something that a lot of people who become like eerily recognizable do. Even Elijah Wood has done a lot of voice acting. He did Over the Garden Wall, he was Spyro and stuff like that. It's a very clever thing to do. Like Mark Hamill did not escape Luke Skywalker. Like when he was in like The Guyver and had a mustache, or when he was in Body Bags, like there are a few things he tried to do that were off kilter from Luke, but eventually you just have to go, fuck it. Just let me talk into a microphone with a silly voice.
Yeah, well, I mean, he did do a good job on the Child's Play reboot. I liked Mark Hamill in that a lot.
Oh, I loved the Child's Play reboot. People were so
too.
just shitty because it looked bad. I was like, it deliberately looks bad. Like, I felt that was a very specific choice. If they wanted it to look good, we have facial animatronics since Ninja Turtles that are better than that. I think the point is that it's supposed to look shitty and eerie and creepy, but also look like a mass marketed product.
Oh, exactly. I mean, it's basically just making fun of Amazon and Jeff Bezos and, you know, all that stuff. Because that's basically, you know, I saw they haven't released it yet, but back when I used to work for Best Buy and Geek Squad, they had it advertised, but I think since COVID they stopped. But they were supposed to have Alexa dolls. I'm like, isn't that Child's Play? Like,
that's a terrible idea.
Yeah.
Just like, imagine the headlines. It would be like, oh, child spends $27,000 on Barbie accessories by conversations with her Alexa doll. Fuck out of here.
Yeah, sit down and it's like, all right, Alexa, what can you do now? She's like, oh, let's kill mommy and daddy now.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, that's on our shopping list.
Yeah, exactly. Would you like to buy rope and a spade? So back to the film itself. Who's your standout? I mean, we've already I don't really care for Rainn Wilson so much in this. He has a couple good moments, but this is a Danny McBride. There's so many people. This is interchangeable. It's as an archetype. He really doesn't do anything for me, even when he has the badass moment at the end with the. I even wrote down the line. Hold, nap time, motherfuckers.
Yeah, it's funny you said that because the first thing that popped in my head, because I couldn't make out who he was because he was wearing the hat and stuff. I thought it was Danny McBride at first.
Oh yeah,
yeah, because he's got like that beer gut now. You know, yeah. But the one who stands out for me, honestly, like the one I was laughing at the most, the guy from Lost who was sitting down talking to the giraffe on shrooms. I'm like, that's funny.
Now, I wish more movies did that. You know, like, show me that character's perception at a time, because obviously he's alone there, right? But I love those moments where you break from reality, and because that's the difference. That's why film is fun. You know, like it's why we're going to see a film instead of a stage play, because you could do this as a stage play. It'd be really weird, but you get what I'm saying? Like the visual trickery you can do. So I wish that more people leaned into it. Yeah.
Yeah. And the funny thing was too, like the little visual cues, like every time it cuts to him, he has, I mean, I don't think I've tried shrooms one time, but for some reason, when I tried it, I always wanted a tub of peanut butter. And there's a scene like later on when it cuts to him, he has a spoon and a peanut butter on the side. I'm like, holy shit! Is like,
wow,
it's just like, holy shit! These writers must have knew.
Seriously,
yeah.
Psilocybin must have a very specific point and purpose.
Yeah, so Jif peanut butter, you know, the proud sponsor of shrooms.
Yeah, I gotta give it to, honestly, Ian Brennan's character as the vice principal, really, really memorable considering how incredibly brief his time on screen is. Like when he does the finger guns and is like, probably shouldn't do that. Really good. One thing that I'll give a lot of the characters credit for, you know, they have some despicable elements, but did you ever watch Vice Principals with Danny McBride on HBO?
I have not.
I watched like 2 episodes, wasn't for me. And I was a big Eastbound and Down guy when that came out. I loved The Righteous Gemstones, but Vice Principals was just not, I was not going to like it. Tonally, it was weird, and the characters, and they just weren't likable. There's a very big thing to me about making my characters likable. If they're going to be deplorable, we at least make them a likable character. And I think this movie makes the characters mostly, even if they're, you know, formulaic, likable.
Yeah, I mean, and they did a good job trying to make the kids all seem like dicks. Every single fucking kid in this movie was like an asshole. I'm like, you know, if I was in school, I would get the shit slapped out of me if I called him. What did he say? What did he tell Elijah Wood? Eat a dick?
Yeah.
So, you know, I'm just like, man, like, wash your fucking mouth out, kid. So
I gotta say, it's hokey and dumb, but when he does the eat, I think it's a cock, eat a cock
Eat a
back
cock,
when he
yeah.
does with the trailer hitch at the end, I was like, that's good. Because I love those last action lines. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I do too. And yeah, a little homage to the hitchhiker from Creepshow too. You know, when the
Yeah.
kid gets pushed back on the hitch and then gets smashed behind the tree. That's some good hitchhiker stuff there. So yeah, that had some good gore in there. And this is one of the few movies that you can see where it's like you bask in like, oh yeah, these kids are getting chopped up. I like it. So
Yeah. I mean, a certain part of you always wants more, right? More gore, more violence. But I mean, it also is a budgetary constraint. Originally, they didn't have the budget to do the whole flaming jungle gym of doom and the shots out, like away from the school. Apparently, at one point, it was proposed they would drive to like a cabin, and there would be a swarm of kids that would be encircling the cabin, and that would be the end. But then they were able to get more budget. So it always comes to what's at hand, and that's one of the frustrating things about independent film. I could not for the life of me find a reliable source for a budget for this film. Did you see anything?
I didn't see anything on my endeavors too, as much as Wikipedia is an endeavor, but you know, but I mean, hey, they did a good job because the school and everything, like it definitely felt like an imprisonment. You know, watching this movie, it's like, man, is school really this like prison? Like, you know what I mean? Like you can't
Yeah.
escape. So
Well, I always love a good excuse to close off a world, right? So often it's like, oh, I don't have cell phone reception. So, like when it's, cabin in the woods and it's all very deliberate, okay, that makes sense. With this, when they take the phones, okay, it's deliberate. When you have the, policy, we don't do phones, it explains why there's no landline, it's deliberate. So, you fall into those scenarios. And it also is a good way of making fun of kind of like pseudo new age bullshit. So, I mean, that closing a campus, literally lockdown, those things work. It kind of helps you get around like the logical gaps of like people just being like, hey, I'm just going to abandon my kids. But then by that point that you're like, oh, people should have been picked up from school, there's already shit going on elsewhere. So that helps a lot.
yeah, I'm trying to think of some other stuff in here that we could hit on. So like I said, tonally, I think you said the same thing as Becky, where like in the middle it kind of like tapers off a bit.
Yeah.
So you get all these jokes and one-liners and the goofy stuff going on with like the zombie kids, but then it turns really serious when Elijah Wood goes into the heater vent. And then they're having that logical conversation and she's crying. I'm like, man, this turned into a drama. And they're talking about the whole thing like, oh, school, I was never a writer, da 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 da. And I'm just like, man, this movie changed. I was watching. I'm like,
But that's one of the things that's frustrating is the words on the page you could see working. It's the way it's done that doesn't really work, right? Because like, the characters and their motivations and everything, that revelation, if not played so straight and so like solemn, could be kind of fun if she is kind of creeped out. But this movie, and I don't know if you listen to the Starship Troopers episode, you probably should because it's fucking amazing. But on that, I talked about in the filmmaking, originally Denise Richards' character got with the guy Xander, then got with Johnny Rico at the end. And people in the test audiences were like, no. She can't be a floozy and then be a floozy to the flooziest. And that kind of happens in this film with Allison Pill, where she's like, I'm floozying, I'm getting kissed by Rainn Wilson, and there's no definitive end game. Did that bother you?
It did a little bit. I was hoping Rainn Wilson would have died, to be honest.
Yeah.
And it's weird how that happened because I'm like, oh, he's alive. Okay, all right, whatever. But because like I said, the tonal thing is like they're making jokes about like Leigh Whannell has like shit on his hands, and he's like, and they're like, oh, that's so gross, and then you get the scene where it's like, we need to talk.
Yeah,
he's an asshole, and I'm so sorry. I've always loved you. I'm like, whoa.
And one of the things that's really interesting is they do the reversal of expectations even in that conversation when he's on the floor of the bathroom and she comes in and he's like, how come she never smiled at me like that? And he like poetically lets her go. And then he's like, go fuck yourself. So within that scene, you have the whiplash, but then within the architecture of the movie, you have the whiplash. So it gets to be a little bit much. It's kind of talking out of both sides of your mouth at a certain point.
Yeah. So a great way to put that there, talking out of both sides of your mouth there. I mean, that's pretty much how it is here too. So we'll see how this movie goes. Like when, everything kind of opens up. Well, I know Florida's kind of like this, so I feel bad for Aid. So
Yeah, seriously. Yeah, if the idea that you could so easily do a sequel to this and have people just be like deniers, like, nah, it doesn't happen. And then you have people like Joe Rogan eating fucking dewormer and being like, dewormer will save you. You save your money on your diseased chicken nuggets you got on discount, and then you put some wormer in. Even when I spend the money on the wormer and the nugget, it's still cheaper than your organic shit.
yeah, see, this will be much more entertaining, and you could probably even get a cameo from Alex Jones saying, "The Cooties that don't exist. You need my filters, my filters, my filters."
Gay frogs.
Yeah, that's no disease. These cooties are turning the frickin' frogs gay, or the reptilian shapeshifters. That's what these cooties are.
Yeah, but in this film, it wouldn't be chicken nuggets. It would be pizza and Pizzagate.
Yeah. Well,
interestingly, I did read that Elijah Wood did think that there was a mass conspiracy regarding child molestation in Hollywood. But given that he was a child in Hollywood, it's less speculative, and I give a little more credence to that. It's still a little cringy just to even conceive of.
Yeah. Well, you want to know? I mean, look at the Jeffrey Epstein stuff. I don't know. Like, I don't think he killed himself, but that's just me. I'm like, there's this goes a lot deeper. Like Harvey Weinstein and all that. Fuck them. But yeah, I don't know. It's sad to say, but when you have so much power and money, you know what I mean? You basically run everything, and it's sad to say, but I gotta side on Elijah Wood with that.
Yeah, honestly, and that's a serious tone. Going back to the Rainn Wilson thing before I forget, because you had mentioned it, like you hoping he died. Yeah, he should have died. Him coming back for the rear wheel joke one more time doesn't like it. It was an ending and a resolution that gift wrapped itself, and then they just undid it.
Yeah, well, see, I kind of wanted Elijah Wood to go all Rambo at the end, like he kind of learned his lesson. He's like, yeah, I may not be the hero. I'm not a hero. I like Apple products, but here I am. I'm gonna fight these kids in this playpen area.
Yeah,
that was a funny joke. He's like, I'm no hero. I get excited over Apple products.
That's a good one, and especially with his fucking satchel. But I like that he uses a hockey stick to kill a zombie. Big fan of hockey, but I kind of almost wish that because Allison Pill gets really feral at a certain point, and I think that him yielding to her would have been fun. There being like an alpha in that kind of relationship or something, but just to give that role over to the other guy entirely. I mean, how many movies do you see? There has to be like a sacrifice, right? Look at Day of the Dead. Look at Dawn of the Dead. Look at, Shaun of the Dead, even with David dying. It adds a certain gravitas to what you're going through. And given the fact that, I mean, really, the movie's pretty bloodless when you consider the subject matter.
Oh, what Cooties? Yeah, Cooties was pretty bloodless. I mean, you get some cool shots with the gore and stuff, but which one are you talking about? Shaun of the Dead or?
Well, no, I'm saying like those ones specifically, adding the severity, the violence, and everything. This is already rated R. It's not like you're going to get around that. So that it's not as though they're like worried about the MPAA here. But my point is kind of like the battle at the end when they're using a cymbal and a fast pitch baseball machine. That's not violent enough for really what's happening. We're talking about like life and death, and so you get away scot-free. It just kind of takes away some of, I guess, the fun of it, because the violence in a movie like this, the capricious element of like being able to escape and survive is kind of like the point, right?
Yeah, exactly. And it's weird. It's funny you brought that up too, because I was thinking about the same thing. It's like zombie comedies, like you see a lot of them now, and they're still making them to this day, but I don't think they ever hit as hard. Like, for example, I think what made Shaun of the Dead so great was that it was serious. The zombies were regular zombies, like Romero zombies, but it's just these characters are just kind of drunk guys that want to go to the pub, and it's got gore in there too, like when David gets ripped apart and stuff. Yep. So this one here is a little bit different because I feel like the zombie kids are somewhat goofy. I mean, it's tongue in cheek. That's what makes it different there. So it's still like this cover here where they're all kind of like swinging like that. It's up there. Like it knows what it is. There's some winking at like the whole Hobbit joke and stuff that makes you break the fourth wall pretty much. So
yeah. Well, and I think that this is something where like a more skilled filmmaker at the time, especially like a tandem, you'd expect more dynamic action. And so they could have done almost like a John Wick, very frenetic crank style action set piece at the very end. And I think that would have helped a lot, where even if it wasn't necessarily gory, it would be violent. And I think that could certainly help. Were you disappointed by the Ritalin Adderall stuff where it's like introduced, but then there's not really the payoff you would kind of hope?
Yeah, I mean, I thought that's what it was going to turn into. It's like, oh, like the Martians from Mars Attacks or something. That's
exactly.
But no, it just kind of like sedate. I don't. It was built up like I felt like it was a joke, and then they kind of forgot what they were writing. They're like, oh yeah, we had Ritalin in the script. Yeah, so I guess we'll just kind of avoid that there and just set them all ablaze in the playpen area. So yeah, a little disappointment. They could have really went for that, but then you know what happens? Maybe they were afraid of getting sued by Big Pharma. I don't know.
That honestly could be a possibility. I was surprised that they dropped it by name. You could just say your anti-ADHD medication or whatever, and that would have gotten you there. But like, imagine this scenario: you put all the Ritalin and the Adderall and the fucking Super Soaker, and you're shooting it in their mouths that way. Then they're docile enough to where you don't have to worry about getting bitten. You get some cool gory attacks. You just put a little dummy there and splatter its head. You don't have to pay a child actor. This writes itself.
Yeah, and yeah, you're right. Like, what did they do there? Because I remember at the end there was a cool fire stunt with a kid on fire.
At the very end, that's a great part.
Yeah.
Where it chases the truck. I'm like, that's good.
Yeah, so I'm like, that's no CGI or nothing. And I could contest. I mean, granted, I just did a fire stunt for Killer Waves 2, but it wasn't as crazy as I think they set that kid in gasoline or something. But yeah.
Well, hopefully the kid was,
I don't think it was a kid. Yeah, I think it was a little stunt actor or something. So,
very often I read Ebert's impressions of the films that we do, but very rarely do I ever repeat them on the review itself. I think that he had two really good points I wanted to mention as we're talking about kind of the deconstructing of the filmmakers. He says, Milott and Murnion's uncompromising directorial debut is the type of movie to also sabotage its visual potential, creating a plain genre event out of a unique setting and horde for its zombie apocalypse. I think that's the great point what we're talking about when it comes to action at the end. It is a very unique, different, fresh setting, and it's the same thing of just like, let's run.
Yeah, see, you know what would have made this great? If at first, like, because I thought they were going to bring in a lawnmower, so I thought they were going to go full like Dead Alive, because I heard the noise going. Yeah, it's like they're going to lawnmower all the kids in the play, and if they don't, they just kind of run. You know what I mean? I'm like, oh, come on, make that big gory finale.
It's one of those things where if I knew what the budget was, I could be more sympathetic potentially. But if they had money that they didn't use, I mean, I'll be completely blunt. Justin Raleigh is the guy who did the makeup effects for this. He's done stuff for Westworld, American Horror Story, and Army of the Dead. So he obviously knows what he's doing. But I mean, I know the budgets of those, and I know his work is adequate for those budgets. I don't know what the budget is here. So I don't know how much MacGyvering he did to do the effects here. So it's just, I would love that little extra oomph. Another part of the Ebert review, Cooties keeps a playful attitude. There's no jolt of surprise to be found within the teacher's group of various survival shenanigans. They are simply relocated from one location to the next with inserted shots of hungry kitties providing neither horror nor comedy to their journey. Kind of yes, kind of no. I feel like that's very true for the narrative of them. I do think that the gory vignettes we talked about are good. Them doing, jump rope with the entrails and stuff, the bloody handprints on some of the playground equipment. Again, working around your child actors. What do you think? Do you think that's a fair description of like the narrative arc for our teachers?
That actually, a narrative arc for the teachers. Yeah. And it's sad to say, it's like, yeah, that kind of hits the review right on the head, because they are like in one room, then they're in the library, and then they go to get that kid the candy bar, which is like the basement lounge area. So yeah, it is just kind of one room to the next. And I grant, like you said, I don't know the kind of budget they had, but I mean, I'd understand if it's like, maybe $1 million or less, where they spend most of it on effects or something.
Yeah.
Because like, well, we got this school for 2 weeks, so let's see what we could do with this here. There are some good gags here and there, like the one guy's like, I know how to survive, I'm in CrossFit.
That's so good. I laughed so hard when they said that. As a straight edge vegan guy, there's a classic joke of like a straight edge vegan who does CrossFit walks into a bar. Which does he tell you about first? There's all sorts of jokes like that, and just it's so good.
Yeah, I'm a vegan CrossFitter. What are you?
Yeah.
Well, it's funny at the camp. Well, the gym that I go to right next door is like the competing CrossFit one, and they all kind of come out like, I mean, the people at the camp area, they're all just like, yeah, we're doing boot camp and stuff. The other ones come out with like their $7 vegan green smoothie, like, oh, you're doing those. I'm CrossFit. So,
I never. Yeah.
yeah, like, oh, you're getting your hands dirty by doing push-ups on the cement. Oh, maybe you should join CrossFit. That's what they do.
Yeah. Honestly, the elitism and the gatekeeping that happens in fitness blows my mind. It's like, do you just want the best for people? I don't know. But anyway,
Yeah,
I agree with that. I agree with the guy dying being one of the funnier points. I don't know if I've talked about this tremendously on the show, but anytime I watch one of these movies with my wife, I always put notes when she laughs because I find myself laughing a lot more. A couple of the ones that she laughed at was when Doug slaps the brain on the floor and he does the Rebecca, please be quiet. She thought that was very funny, which was a good bit. There's a couple other ones. Hold on, let me Control F, find the wife. Drugging up. Wait, oh, yes. When the kids are like popping their drugs really quick in the Edgar Wright style vignette, she laughed out loud at that. Rainn Wilson's running made her laugh out loud. So it's, she didn't laugh at like a lot of it, but I think that a lot of it's kind of, like you said, it's a little negligible when it gets to here we are, there we are, boom, boom, boom. I feel like if there was more of a thrust, a point and purpose. And I get that zombie movies, you're trying to do the situation, especially here, they don't say zombies, right? So it's not like, oh, we need to barricade ourselves like in Dawn of the Dead. It's like, oh, what do we do? It's this aimlessness. So I get aimlessness to a certain degree, but also like, give me a motivation. And you'd expect like the candy bar would be a great motivation. You'd expect the cell phones to be a great motivation. But again, the filmmaking just doesn't feel strong enough where it's dire circumstances.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's being a little bit pussyfooting around the severity of the film. I think they're trying to make it a little too family friendly there in the sense of like, they're not visibly stressed to the point of like trembling. They're just kind of like, oh, this is what we need to do.
Yeah, someone dies and like they make a joke. They're like, oh, well, that happened. All right, on to the next room.
Yeah, like
So,
if I died and I was right next to you, you'd be a little concerned. Not really, but just a little.
no, I would. And that's why I keep bringing up like the Return of the Living Dead differences, because that's serious. Like all those characters are like scared for their lives. They're not cracking jokes when someone dies, except the second movie. But well, what did I compare that one to? Monster Squad?
Dude, the Wolfman's Got Nards documentary is free on Tubi right now, so that's one of the good ones. And funny enough, speaking of Tubi, that's how I watched it this time. There was a great commercial for shingles inoculations, and it had some really great special effects on there. So if you watch this on Tubi to follow along with your old pal Slashers, you might see some great gore effects. But Tom Matthews, him in Return of the Living Dead, is fucking perfect for your horror comedy because he takes everything so seriously, but that's the great part. Like it's funny because it's this cathartic breath of relief as you're like, oh, it's not, there, but for the grace of God go I. I'm not in that situation, but that's like a fairly realistic. If you were literally finding out that you were dead on the floor of a warehouse, you would shriek and freak out and yell. But the way he does it's funny because you have this very safe frame around it, right?
Yeah, exactly. And same with James Karen too. Like when he's like, what do we do? We call the boss. And he like sits there and like straightens his hair. You know what I mean? Like that's kind of how I thought these characters in Cooties, maybe if they acted more like that, where it's like they're legit freaking out instead of like making like jokes when someone dies. I don't know. It's weird.
Yeah, or have the one character do that. You have the Doug character do that. Doug got a little bit muddled towards the end. I think that there was a little bit of like improv on set. He's obviously the most funny character, but sometimes, I'm a huge Abbott and Costello fan. Mm-hmm. And let me tell you, Bud Abbott needs to get a fucking medal because sometimes the way you can be the funniest is by not being fucking funny at all. And so sometimes to service the film overall, sacrificing some of those like lesser comedic beats is better. And so, when it gets to the weird, I always wanted to have sex with a prostitute of a different race. That's completely antithetical to the other stuff, like when he has the Velcro and he's like, and my uncle lost his liver to cancer and his brain to his divorce or whatever. How was your weekend? That's fucking funny shit. But like it varies wildly. Am I making sense? Because the rest of
yeah, definitely. No, you are, because like you said, Abbott and Costello, and my favorite. I love the Three Stooges. Like they're like my like top tier, but my favorite Stooge was always Larry, and Larry was the reactionary guy.
Yes.
So you know what I mean, like just the facial reaction, like that's kind of how like I wish these characters were more of like the reactionary ones, like because that's fun. You don't have to say a joke. You could do the joke visually with your facial reactions or how you react to something than saying something. I think that's funnier for because you're watching a movie, so less dialogue, more showing how it is, because that's funnier in the end, and you could watch it over and over again and then pick up and say, oh, that makes more sense now. So
and to your point, especially when it comes to watching violence unfold, Larry's great because he makes you realize this is fucked. Like Moe's hurting Curly. Like this is serious, and it's severe, and he breaks that tension by being aware of the tension because you're kind of addressing it and kind of moving forward. And so again, like having somebody react, like how uncouth is it to make a joke at a corpse that was killed by a child? It's not the best, and so maybe having somebody look at that person and judge them like that's a little fucked, a little too soon. A great one again from Return of the Living Dead, Don Calfa.
Mm-hmm.
Ernie, like the crematorium dude, he does a great job of being very like freaked out and very somber, but still getting comedic beats. Now that you put that in my head, I'm sitting here thinking the movie. I'm like, fuck, if we just recast this entire film with Return of the Living Dead characters, this would be a fucking amazing movie.
Yeah, or characters that don't rely so much on like their Office fame or like kind of, because the thing is, I feel like they're playing themselves a lot of the ways. Like some of the the blonde guy in the back, like he plays that same character in every movie he's in.
Oh, Jack McBrayer.
Yeah, he played like in Tim and Eric. Yeah, it's the same character. So I feel like they ripped them all out of these sitcoms and just stuck them in place. They're like, okay, have fun riffing on these gory kid zombies. So I'm like, you know what I mean? Like, so there was a script, but I'm sure they got a lot of like, oh, well, you're a comedian, so make it funny.
Yeah, I will give you that. So now that you've said that, I'm looking at my cast of characters from Return of the Living Dead. I think we need to do a recast right now. Obviously, Tom Matthews replaces Elijah Wood, right?
Mm-hmm.
Easy. I think Clu Gulager, who plays Bert, would be a great Rainn Wilson.
Yeah, I was thinking the same thing. Yeah, coming in like I'm gonna knock his fucking block off.
Yeah. So, my pitch. Check this out. I think you're gonna like this. Stoner crossing guard Miguel Nunez Jr., the "Oh Them Enchiladas" guy.
Oh yeah, and then on the side you could have peanut butter and then some enchiladas on the side. You know what I mean?
That'd be awesome.
And he's got the same van he has in Friday Part 5. So
yeah, there you go.
Yeah, so he's got that in there. Yeah, no, Miguel Nunez. Yeah, I don't know what he's doing now, but he's got to come back. That's whether it's enchiladas or Return to Living Dead,
for sure. With Allison Pilt, luckily, there's only so many things you can do. Linnea Quigley, trash. I think she could do it really well. Also blonde in real life. I don't know if I'm ruining anybody's fixations. I was fixated with redheaded flat tops for a long time, not her actual hair.
Well, I mean, that's what dye, soap, and water will do. So it's easy to do it. Just try to convince your significant other. It's like, can you cut your hair like a flat top? Like when your wife goes to get a cut, she's like, how do you want it? A little here, trim the sides.
G.I. Joe, maybe.
I got some orange paint. What do you need this for? Well, it is pumpkin spice season, so it'll fit.
There you go. Can you believe in August they already had this pumpkin spice? Fucking ridiculous.
Yeah, I'm a victim to that too because I already had 2.
What?
Yeah,
you fiend. I think Don Calfa could play like 4 or 5 of these characters. I really think that he'd make a great Doug.
Yeah, he would. We basically was playing Doug because he's kind of doing that whole. He's like, oh, I examined the brain and
autopsies.
Yeah. No, Don Calfa would play a good Doug. Let's see, who else can we cast in here?
There's Jack McBrayer. I kind of want to say Suicide just because I think that Mark Venturini doing like the kind of effeminate presentation would be funny. Do you have a better one?
No, you actually hit that on the head. Or Brian Peck. Well, see, Brian Peck in Return of the Living Dead, he was just kind of another reactionary guy. Like his
Yeah.
stuff in there was just kind of reactionary. So I don't think he stood out as much um, as Scuzz. But who else could play him there? Possibly the you know, it would be funny if he played like the military guy, the one that's at
Okay.
home. Yeah.
Yeah. There you go. And, I think that's actually a pretty dang fair one because
Yeah,
that rigid posturing. I think that the double entendre of gayness would be a lot funnier if it's delivered by like, a ostensibly hetero guy, right?
yeah,
Who
like
doesn't get
like
the
a
joke.
proper straight guy. He's on the phone talking. He's like, "Oh yes, that's my boyfriend's balls. They're great. They're soft. They're fine. They're balls. Everyone likes balls, right?" Like just imagine him delivering that line.
I like his firm balls. Like, and then when we get to the vice principal, I think I saved the best for last when it comes to this recast. James Karen, I think, would do a great job with it.
Oh, James Karen would do great. Yeah. Just coming out saying like, "Well, I'm the vice principal. We try to do things calm. So hand me your phone. Thank you." You know what I mean? He's trying to be cool because he plays the vice principal pretty much the same way. It's like he's trying to be the cool guy.
Yeah.
Like when he shows Tom Matthews like, "Hey, look at the basement. We got some corpses from the military there." Where he's trying to be cool and trying to impress, the
Exactly.
new hire. So there you go.
That was actually my sole basis was that scene of being like, I'm not supposed to show you this. Like I could just see him be like, oh, I'm not your normal vice principal. You know what they say when the vice principal's away? God, that's some good writing.
Yeah, exactly. James Karen would fit that role perfectly. So yeah, he passed away. Did he pass away? I think he did. Yeah, yeah. Clu Gulager's still alive. I seen him right before the pandemic. He used to go to the New Art Theater screenings at midnight for the midnight movies, and he'd always be sitting in the front row. Even if it's a movie he's not in, he'd be sitting there and he'd always have he'd be sleeping all the time. So, yeah.
Man, he must maybe grew up in New York and needed the hustle and bustle and all that noise to sleep. But Karen lived to 94. So I mean, not a bad life overall.
Yeah, he's got a bad string of luck. He let out the zombies at his job, and then he also sold a house filled with corpses underneath and Poltergeist.
Yeah. Now, Poltergeist reminds me of Poultrygeist. The opening to this film with the green filter on the chickens, I was like, could you think of anything else?
The exact same thing popped in my head. I'm like, oh, this is like those flavor pods from Poultrygeist.
Yeah.
So he's like,
and so I have to say this: if you haven't, check out Jason Yushannon's book. What is the strange happenings? What the fuck? Why can't I remember it? I'm gonna edit this out of the other one. Yeah, number 2, Morning View. Check that shit out. I'm such an asshole for not knowing that. I've already read the book. Yeah, so I'm gonna recut myself saying this. If you haven't checked it out already, Jason Yushannon of Poultrygeist fame, who was previously on this show, check out his book, The Mysterious Happenings at 2 Morning View.
There you go. Yeah, see, you got the references there. You get the same Poultrygeist burgers. I wonder if I'm sure Elijah Wood has watched Poultrygeist before this. He had to have because he's into all those like crazy like he's on this. Criterion has a channel on YouTube where they have like these filmmakers or actors going in showing their favorite movies. And I remember Elijah Wood going and he was talking about Sweet Movie and Sallow. So I'm like, man, this guy knows his bizarre cinema.
Well, and he's in Toxic Avenger, the new one that they just finished shooting. I'm so excited.
That's right. Yeah. Well, I hope Toxic. Okay, now here's something for you. Would Toxic Avenger remake work with this style humor, or do you think it needs that seriousness like the first one where it's like not so much because this isn't on Citizen Toxie's par, but like how the first Toxic Avenger is where it's pretty serious besides some of like the overacting characters, but
and I think that's the perfect way of putting it. It's absurdist in a very visceral and severe way. And I think that's what the movie needs. And I think that it is possible to recreate that magic. I'm very cautiously optimistic given the people who are involved and the things that I have seen and read. And just like, I'm giving it the benefit of the doubt, but I could also see it being a colossal failure to try and do that because it's so one-to-one comparison. I've been comparing, I'm going back to pro wrestling. Pro wrestling's come back into my purview because everybody's like, "Don't CM Punk, you're straight edge, you gotta love the fuck with CM Punk." And so I saw there's a thing where CM Punk's going to go against a guy, Darby Allin, who has his face painted. And then there's Sting, who has his face painted. And Sting is like the mentor of this other guy. And I'm like, well, then why the fuck am I watching the other guy? Sting's already there. Like, so it's really hard when you transpose the two things. You're giving me one thing that's very similar, but I have a sentimental affection for, and another thing that's just sentimental that I don't have an affection for. When you put it that close, it's really easy for the original to win, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because that's the good thing too. Like Elijah Wood being in this, and when the Toxic Avenger comes out, like the remake, I mean, I got him tattooed on me, so it's like one of my favorite movies. But the thing is, there's so many ways you can go, because the first movie is totally different from 2 and 3. And 2 and 3 are totally different from the first one and the fourth movie, because the fourth movie is it's its own tone. It's crazy. So it's like the remake. What the hell is it going to be? Is it going to be like Cooties, or is it going to be something more severe? I don't know.
I hope that it's just severe, because I think that's one thing that we can all kind of agree on is this one. But I mean, also when you think about the budget, it might not be able to have the faculties and research, but there are people who are attached to it. At one point, J.J. Abrams was talking about it. So, I mean, it's I just don't know. There's a lot of uncertainty there.
Yeah, and then I saw Peter Dinklage is Peter Dinklage playing Toxie? That's what I heard.
That's what I've read, and could be amazing. That's one of those weirdness things where it's like, yeah, that could totally work. And it's also one of those weirdness things of like Marlon Brando saying he should voice a puppet that's a sandwich. You just don't know.
Yeah, well, I'm excited for it, so we'll see. Cooties was kind of a good entry point for something that, like, tonally it's tongue-in-cheek and it makes fun of itself in the films, but it's not as goofy as some of those other films. Like, there's some other film. Well, okay, what's another film like Cooties that you would recommend tonally like this?
Oh, hardcore, it has to be Little Monsters. I love it. But here's actually a better one. So I was thinking of like rom-com zombies and stuff like that. And comparing it to those isn't as good. The one thing I would really like to compare it to is Cyst. Remember, we did a whole fucking month on Cyst last year. I love that movie. I love Travis. I love Jason Douglas. Everybody was so gracious with their time. Eva Haber, so beautiful with their time. And I really got to immerse myself with it. And every fucking interview I did, I was like, hey, I love the runtime. Thank you for keeping it short and simple. If you cut 20 minutes out of this film, it's a banger. Mm-hmm. But if you don't, I mean, if you're going to make me sit through the dumb shit sentimental scene, you better give me something gutsy at the end. So that's my big comparison is if you like this, but you don't love this, you'll love Cyst. What about you?
Yeah. So this one always falls along the same line of, it felt like Super. You ever watch Super? And that was
James Gunn, baby.
James Gunn. Yeah. Cause that's one where it's like, it does have its gore, but then it also has like the tongue-in-cheek kind of winking at the camera. It's like, oh, we're gonna make. So that's what it reminded me of. And Rainn Wilson happens to be in this movie too. Yep. So maybe it's just him improvising, but that's what I feel like it felt like a lot of. Because here's the thing, Elijah Wood almost gets overshadowed by all these characters. I kind of forget he's there, but he's just like, oh, I'm here. I'm the book writer and.
Yeah, it's interesting though because the fact that he does is kind of the point. But I think that that's a failure of filmmaking and stuff because his performance is good. I like it quite a bit.
Yeah, and you like the little references to like Stephen King. He's like, oh, the guy just wants to fuck his boat.
Oh my god, the Christine line made me die laughing, and my wife was like, "What are you talking?" And I was like, "Shut up." But you just brought up something to my mind. So after Juno, Rainn Wilson was in Super with Elliot Page. And that was 3 years later. So I'm wondering if there may have been like a tongue-in-cheek, like they were fucking around when they threw the candy bars at each other. I'm hoping so because that just sounds toxic and awful.
Yeah, well, he was yelling at the director of Juno. He's like, yeah, fucking asshole. Like you just got to watch it. I don't want to. It's negative. And it gave me a sour taste in my mouth for Rainn Wilson. But maybe he's come along his ways. You never know. People could have bad days.
Well, that's funny enough. That director. Jason Reitman obviously doing Ghostbusters, but he also worked with Elijah Wood on the Princess Bride at home fan recreation bullshit. So that's cute. Okay. Everything comes around, motherfucker.
Yeah, maybe he was just having a bad day. He was stuck on 405 traffic or something, So
honestly, I'd fucking hate my life if every day somebody came up to me and was like, beats, bears, battles. I'd be like, shut the fuck up. I'll break you in half.
All right, word of advice for all you listeners out there: don't do the.
What would they do to me to harass me in the street? They'd come up and go, "Big bug, boom."
Yeah, it's like, stop doing that. But see, the thing is, if you tell people that do that to you, stop doing that, I don't like it, they're gonna do it more.
Yeah.
That's how
And that kind of
trolling
goes
works.
to Elijah Wood leaving the Hobbit line in because he knew he's the butt of the joke, but that's what the people want to an extent.
Yeah, and that's what made him go crazy and do Maniac. So
There we go. It all comes around. Now, how would we harass you on the street, Dougie boy? If any of our fans see you, do they just run up and start doing the Karen voice?
the kid, yeah, I'm gonna speak to your manager, or I don't know that, or like
Boomer Doug.
Boomer Doug, like, hey, Boomer Doug, hey, what are you doing out there? That gas is $4.50. Back in my day, it used to be 98 cents. We used to eat oil metal with our hands and sandwiches with white bread, and we used to enjoy it. Not like you damn millennials. Just doing that Buck Flowers voice, and I'm like, hey, but see, I don't really get annoyed by stuff like that. I'm like, hey, what's your? Let's go get a coffee. So you annoy me, I'll say, yeah, let's go get coffee or something.
I actually watched a thing on Reddit where it was like two kids fighting, and a guy comes up and he's like, "You're just acting like fools for each other. These kids are just sitting there laughing at you." I've always thought that would be the funniest shit of like somebody coming up trying to antagonize you, and then you like just dissect them on a visceral, like psychological level. Let's break down your motivations for trying to harass me. Like, have you hugged your parents lately? That would be a great TikTok.
Well, usually, like when people come up and I mean, no one ever really comes up to me, but people who are just kind of assholes, I'm like, what's your problem? Like, I'll literally just say, it's like, dude, what's your problem? Like, are you trying to like piss me off? Like, it's not working. Just leave me alone. You know what I mean? Like, that's happened at like a few conventions and people just don't shut up about stuff. Like just random things. Like I'm like, it's like being stuck on a bus and someone's having to conversate to you, and you got to kind of interact with them and give them that fake smile. It's like, yeah, I'm stuck with you for this ride, but shut up. And that's usually when I'll bring out the phone and be like, oh, hey, I got to take this call.
Oh, I'm the king of the fake phone call. Mm-hmm. I've had dialogues that went back and forth for an entire, and then at one point, check this out. Pro tip, if you're ever going to do this, fuckheads, screen cap your phone at least once when you're in a phone call. That way you can click that image and then hold that up to your head. So if you hold the phone away, somebody sees the phone lit up, it's the phone call. So they don't suspect, hey, that person's not on the actual phone. Learn to be antisocial, buttholes.
Yeah, thank God for AirPods. You know what I mean? That's like the international sign of just stick those in your ear, even if you're not listening to anything. But
sorry, say again?
Yeah,
I'm going through it.
I'm having this very important meeting. But you want to know what? You get those people too that try to talk to you with headphones.
Oh my God.
And I'm like, there's some lady that walks her dog down the street and she gets mad at me when I walk my dog because she's like, my dog barks at your dog here. I'm going to tell HOA about it. And no one should be walking their dog when I'm walking my dog. And I wear headphones. I wear these Bose ones here, and there's noise canceling. And she's saying humble stuff. Brag. Yeah. And she's just like this. And I'm just like, I don't know. And I'm smiling and she's yelling at me. I'm just like, hey, I know she's bitching at me, but yeah.
Noise canceling, as in you're canceled, as in cancel culture. Take it, Karen. Boom.
There you go. Yeah, Karen. Too many Karens around here. And I'm going to start decorating for Halloween soon. So I'm waiting for the old Karen next door to say, you're decorating for Halloween? Your place is an eyesore. That's what they always say, an eyesore.
My parents would let me go buck wild like the day before the day of Halloween. So at one point, I think I had like 30 dummies out in the yard, and I gathered rebar. I don't even know where a kid finds rebar, but like I staked it into the ground so I could have like zombie like people coming out of it, and one guy like taking a header into it with like his body sticking. And I do all sorts of crazy shit, but I only got like the 1 or 2 days max before people complained.
Yeah, people. Yeah, you gotta back up into them. The people that complain, it's got to be like that kid that's like, eat a cock from this movie. So
yeah. Now, if you'd like, this is a shameless plug for us. I have an idea for a Halloween costume I desperately want to do, but I can't justify monetarily. So if you would like to supplement our income, you can go to coffee.com, Patreon, or you can just Venmo me cash. I want to be a Sentinel, and I want my fat baby to be Wolverine. And I think that would just be the best fucking couples costume ever. What do you think?
Yes. Donate to the foundation of Bubba Shmoo. He needs this.
What's your dream mashup costume? You and Marge, what are you doing?
Oh, me and Marge. Yeah, that's right, Marge. Funny story about that. We went to this restaurant called Pancakes R Us, and they said they're like, "What's the name?" And I was talking, and I always call my girlfriend Marge Simpson. It's just a joke. And so they wrote down Marge Simpson on the paper, and so they come out and like when our time was up, Marge Simpson, table for two for Marge Simpson, and everyone just starts laughing. And it's like you don't understand who Marge Simpson is. That's the joke. But I think the power couple outfit, I wanted to go as Jeffrey Franken, and she wanted to go as Frankenhooker.
Oh, it's so good.
Yeah, she's like, I gotta find those boots though. Those Frankenhooker boots. Those are kind of hard to find. I think those were custom made.
Want a date?
Yeah, going out looking for some action. So we walking around and stuff like that. The other thing too is like she always like, oh, let's go as Tiffany. Sorry, my dog's having a spasm attack. He needs that super soaker with Ritalin.
Or with the legally distinct not Adderall, what is it? ADHD medication generic brand, so we don't get sued.
Yeah, so Ritalin, we're not talking about you. We don't want you to sue us like the Kowalskis do on the Bob Ross documentary. So
oh my god, it's on my watch list. I'm just so scared to watch it.
It's very sad, and you'll hate Bob Ross Incorporated. You'll love Bob Ross, but you won't like the company that does it because they're basically like, you can't use your name, and we owe money for everything, and you basically is, it's stupid. Watch the documentary. You get Doug's recommendation for that. Yeah. So Frankenhooker and Jeffrey Franken, that's an idea. Or this, I'm sure, I don't know if you guys are familiar with Joe Castro, but he invited me to go to this Halloween event, and it's nude zombies, but I guess your penis is like a giant, kind of like the cuttlefish of Cthulhu.
Oh yeah.
So it's like that. So you can look on Joe Castro's page. He does like a bunch of crazy makeup effects. He even did the incel, little baby incel puppet. That we did. He's like, yeah, you should do this nude zombie walking. So I'm like, okay, I'll do it as long as I get like a 10-foot schlong attached to me, then I don't have to embarrass myself out in public.
And your brother recently actually drew the incel puppet in the B-movie TV thing he did for us, right?
He did. Yeah, he drew all of that. So I'm like, hey, you want to whip up something? Because Nick likes B-movie TV. He literally has it on his TV all the time because he does paintball. He runs a paintball place up in San Luis Obispo, and he does art and graphic design. So if you ever need anything, hit up my brother. It's a Fats Man. His name is the Fats Man on Instagram. So
I'm a Fats Man. Sorry.
Well, he's a big fan of Fats Domino. So it's weird. Doom and Fats Domino. He always tries to make his art like Doom meets Fats Domino. So
you know what you should do? You should make a parody account where you're Chubby Checker instead. How about that?
Oh yeah, Battle of the Obese.
Where like basically it's one round of combat and they get tired and fall down.
Yeah. Oh, McDonald's break. Oh.
So speaking of B-movie TV, Douglas, let's say I just can't get enough of you, babe. Where do I find more of you, babe?
Yes. So you can follow me at Doug Bizarro. That's my Instagram. And on B-Movie TV. So if you have a Roku, Friday Night Action is the show I host at 8 p.m. So we got a bunch of crazy movies. We recently got an influx of 1960s violent spaghetti Western films. So we're showing a lot of that. And then Roku. So it's a bunch of free movies and stuff like that. Great stuff. And I recently did an interview with Jonathan Doe, who did the film Barf Bunny, and he'll also run Cinema's Underbelly on YouTube. So a bunch of crazy, extreme, kind of forgotten films. And I'm going to be showing that. We're going to try to show Barf Bunny on B-Movie TV as well, too, with along with the interview I did with him.
That's awesome. And we'll be putting that out this month, if I'm not mistaken, with our Hack to School stuff.
Yes, so it's good stuff. It's crazy. So if you guys are, into like extreme and like underground cinema, definitely check out Cinema's Underbelly on YouTube. It's great content. What about you, Jake? I happen to like Saturday nights and I like horror movies. So where can we find you?
Yeah, I was worried that I'd zoned out because I was like, usually you cue me in, but I'm going to cue myself. You just cued me in too. Sorry, it's one of those days. My brain was like leaking out of my ears for a second. I host Saturday Night Terrors, which is a show about terrors on Saturday nights. And basically, I just cue in a bunch of weird shit. Lately, I've done a couple swap offs with you in the past. We have it's kind of week to week the content. We've had a lot of vampire stuff lately, which is interesting. I usually don't associate vampires with the summer because usually there's more sunlight, but hey, it's cool. I'm liking it.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, Graveyard Shift 2 is what you did, which I actually like that movie. I gotta say, that movie there, it's the slowest draining when she's like, I just need a pint of blood. And she's biting that girl's hand. She's like, stop. What are you doing? Stop.
Yeah.
I don't want you to do this. Stop. And it's like, she's a vampire. What do you expect? She's like, I'm sorry. I took too much blood. No.
Well, then also, so this last week I did Blood and Donuts, another one, super weird, great soundtrack, by the way, but same kind of stuff where it's just like this weird movie that kind of exists with a weird budget. David Cronenberg did a great cameo in it, which is fucking amazing. So we got a lot of cool content. So every Saturday night at 10 p.m. on Roku, check it out.
Yeah, and then if you like real cheesemate stuff, I just finished it, Aid's book. So the Toxic Love from Aid. It's great. Yeah, just I recommend it. It brings a tear to the eye. Last Call, a toxic love story. So definitely check that out by One Aid.
And for those of you who don't remember, if you buy a copy of Aid's book off of Amazon, you will get access to each and every Patreon bonus episode we've ever recorded, which has a monetary value of I've already mentioned Patreon. You can do that. Redbubble, you can do that. Buy some shit, have some fun designs coming out, blah, blah, blah. Doug, is there anything that we left off before we let these goons go for today?
No, I'll let you guys go. And let me just give you the sign of the cross here. It's 1, 2, 3, 4. Now you got the cootie shot. So your guys are good to go. You've been blessed with the cooties.
Oh, trivia I have to mention. Leigh Whannell's wife insisted on the inclusion of the circle, dot scene where the girl blesses the guy, blah, blah, goodbye and good die.
Yeah, that's a circle, dot. You got to see, I blame the coffee for getting, I need Ritalin. This movie proves the one thing I need to take a super soaker and just drown in some Ritalin to get my facts straight.